Hello, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, no matter where you are in the world. And thank you for joining us today for our FinTech Circle webinar focused on green data strategies to reduce energy bills and cut CO2 emissions. So this is a topic which I know is deep and very close to many of your hearts across the FinTech sector, across financial services, because all of us are thinking about both ESG goals, about reducing our energy footprint, reducing our CO2 emissions, while at the same time cutting costs. And one of the reasons why costs became such a big issue is because most fintech companies, most banks, most insurance companies and asset managers use so much more data nowadays. And they use data for AI, for machine learning purposes. And the more data we use, the more costs we generate. And that's why we chose today's topic really to focus on how and what a green data strategy is all about. And as a speaker, we've chosen Warren Barry, the director of Bulk. So if I can ask Warren now to join me. Good morning, Warren. How are you?
Hi, good afternoon, Suzanne. I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Yes, very well. Thank you. So Warren Barry is the director of Bulk. And Bulk is a leader in data centers across Europe and who has got an incredible track record of both really focused on sustainability and also allowing, cost reductions of 50% plus for any UK companies moving and analyzing and implementing a green data strategy. So that's will be the key focus for our conversation today. My name, most of you know me already. I'm the CEO of FinTech Circle. My name is Suzanne Chisti. I will be your host today. And what we're going to do is I will hand over now to Warren to present to you his approach and his recommendations how to put a green data strategy in practice. And then we will open up for a Q&A session. And this Q&A session will be your opportunity to really ask any questions you would like to get answered, any concerns, any ideas, any feedback you're looking for your own company strategy and your own company's goals. And so we will go through your personal Q&As, questions afterwards. And at the end, the session will also be recorded, so it will be available for replay and is available to download and share it as well with other colleagues of yours who might not have been able to join us today. So that's our agenda, and we should be finishing in about 50 minutes time. So with that, I would like now to hand over to Warren Barry, director at Bulk. So Warren, I'm handing over to you and looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Suzanne. Hi all, delighted to be here today and talking to you about this important topic. As Suzanne mentioned, I am Senior Director at Bulk Infrastructure, responsible for the go-to-market strategy and business development activities to the international community. So before I get into the core of the presentation deck, I'm going to do a quick introduction to bulk infrastructure or bulk data centers. It's probably important for everyone to know or have a flavor for who we are as a business. So thanks. If you just click onto the next slide, Glenn. Great, thank you. So just a little bit about Bulk. Bulk is a Nordic-centric infrastructure business headquartered out of Oslo. We invest in, own and operate our assets using world-class partners and supply chains. We have three business lines: an industrial real estate business, a data center business, and a fiber-based business. I sit in the data center business, so I sit in the business you see in the middle of those three there, and I'm responsible, as I mentioned before, for the go-to-market and business development on a global basis. The four pillars by which our business operates on is we invest in assets that are sustainable, they're infrastructure-based, they are scalable, so we can meet our customers' needs now and in the future, and they are importantly located in the Nordics. The reason we locate our assets in the Nordics is because it is home to one of the globe's renewable giants. In this region, we produce a hell of a lot of hydro energy, which obviously bodes incredibly well for these infrastructure-based assets. Thank you, Glenn. So coming on to our data center portfolio, we have 3 data centers in the Nordic region, 2 of which are located in Norway and 1 of which is located in Denmark. Our super large campus is the N01 campus, so the one you can see in the middle there. That is located in Kristiansand, which is on the southern tip of Norway, and it's built for large hyperscale, high-performance computing deployments. So currently today, we're seeing demand from the enterprise, cloud, and specialist high-performance computing industries, typically from sectors like the finance sector, the automotive, the pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, and even meteorology sectors. Thanks, Glenn. So coming on to why it's important to consider sustainability, and Glenn, if you click to the next slide. Thank you. So to frame the discussion, the problem today is growing exponentially, and big data apps are having a profound impact on energy use because they are highly compute intensive. So this consequently has a negative impact on the carbon emission output, and the net result is carbon emissions are growing. So the numbers highlighted in the above slide compares 2020 to 2025, where we see a tripling of data consumed in zettabytes over a relatively very short period of time. And the interesting little infographic, which is published by the University of Massachusetts on the right-hand side, gives context and benchmarks how many CO2 emissions are emitted through each of these use cases. So clearly, on the right-hand side of the infographic, you can see the example of the training and AI model, which resonates with the fintech community or the financial services community, illustrates that this is by far the worst offender compared to the airline industry or even the automotive industry. So quite a surprising contrast there. But, this part of society is the largest and fastest growing segment and really does put a spotlight on the demands it places on energy use and carbon emissions, which highlights the need to obviously source the lowest carbon output regions to house this compute. So over that period of time, 20 to 2025, we pretty much see a tripling of data consumed from 64 zettabytes to greater than 180 zettabytes. That has an immediate impact on data center traffic and consequently the carbon emissions output. Thank you, Glenn. So coming onto this slide, the headline and trend graphs are fairly scary when you look at this slide. We are seeing a doubling of electricity consumption and a tripling of greenhouse gas emissions from data centers between now and 2030. So you can see I've highlighted there between 2022 and 2030, there is a doubling in electricity consumption and a tripling in greenhouse gas emissions. So we should really take note of these implications and really carefully consider how we as responsible citizens reverse the carbon emissions so that they don't triple over the next 8 years. If we continue to do the same things as we are doing today, which is sticking our compute loads in markets that are reliant on fossil fuels, we will never, ever reverse this trend. But if we were to place these workloads in markets that deliver 100% renewable energy and 100% low carbon output, then we can reverse the trend in this graph. So more than often than not, these workloads do not need to be proximate to the businesses and can easily sit in regions that are fairly remote from these businesses, such as Norway. That run entirely on renewable energy and it is our responsibility as consumers of this electricity to ensure that it is best placed where the planet can best accommodate it. Thanks, Glenn. So, what is the carbon impact in real terms? So the simple fact is that you can stick 12 times the amount of compute capacity in Norway as you do in London and emit the same carbon emissions. So that is probably a stat that's worth repeating. 12 times the compute capacity in Norway to emit the same amount of CO2 emissions as in London. So in this particular slide, we compare London to the southwest of Norway based on an electrical consumption of 1 megawatt of IT load. And when you break this down into tangible examples, this is the same as 2,137 passenger vehicles being driven in a year, 1,142 residential homes energy use in a year, 1.1 million gallons of gasoline consumed, and just under 13,000 acres of forest required to absorb the CO2. So that puts it into tangible examples of purely placing a workload in a different region that does not need to sit proximate to the business. Thanks, Glenn. Okay, so what we have here is pretty much power production across Europe. And this, again, paints a very, very interesting picture. So the image you see in front of you is taken directly from electricitymap.org. Their mission is to organize the world's electricity data to drive the transition towards a truly decarbonized electricity system. And how they depict this is obviously through colors and the traffic light system you see in front of you. Green indicates good carbon intensity and renewable and low carbon energy production, whilst as you travel through the colors from amber into darker colors, that paints the opposite side of that picture. But in principle, what we're looking at is three things on this map. We're looking at how carbon intensive electricity production or consumption is across the European region. And this is also reflected globally, by the way. And this is pretty much done in real time or updated hourly. We're looking at how much of the electricity production is low carbon and how much of the electricity produced is renewable. So if we compare Norway, which is where we have our data centers located, to other key European markets, the southwest of Norway produces 21 grams of carbon for every kilowatt of energy produced. Now compare that to other key European markets, such as the UK, which produces 287 grams of carbon, Germany, 292 grams, France, 81 grams, Spain, 84 grams, so slightly better than the UK and Germany. But as you can see, that it is far more efficient to relocate workloads to regions that are have a very low carbon intensity. Add to that 100% renewable energy and 100% low carbon compared to these other markets that are still heavily reliant on fossil fuel production, and then we start to see the why. This really communicates the picture of why we should be moving workloads to regions that can really accommodate these workloads in a very low carbon intensity fashion. Thanks, Glenn.
And I just wanted to add, Warren, to your slide, we also just showed a polling question for our attendees. And you've seen probably the polling question popping up on your screens, which was about renewable energy availability, that it is becoming a very real factor in data center energy and sustainability strategies. And how important is this to your business? And Warren, I wanted to report the results back to you. So we have, the result is very unique. It's basically says 100% of all our attendees believe that's the case. So it's really, renewable energy availability is a very real factor in data center energy and sustainability. So everybody believes that's the case. Actually, I've got one now coming in saying becoming also important, so either important or it's very important. So that's the response of our audience.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. Not surprising at all.
Yes.
Okay, so coming on to not only are there sustainability benefits for sticking your workloads into regions that can really accommodate them, but there are also vast cost benefits for doing that as well. So not only do you benefit from the sustainability piece, but you realize enormous cost savings. And this is principally down to the surplus of energy produced in this renewable region and the very low tax structure attributed to energy taxation in this region as well. So the slide you've got in front of you, this is illustrative of the power or energy cost difference between running the same infrastructure in London versus running it in Kristiansand, Norway, which is where we have our data center. And what we've done is we've simulated this on a real opportunity for 20 megawatts of IT load over a 10-year term, using the same parameters for the London market as for the Kristiansand market. So basically, this is a large compute deployment, which might be similar to the types of compute deployments you see in the fintech or financial services arena. This was done back in March 2020. So of course, the energy markets have moved on. The power pricing looks very different today. There are major factors that have affected energy costs on a European basis, if not a global basis. These prices have risen across Europe due to the turbulence caused by a number of factors. Principally, the price of gas being skyrocketing. But I guess the important bit to note here is that the key percentage margin difference is still very relevant. So although electricity prices have increased, we're still maintaining the same delta, the same gap of differential between prices in Norway as prices in mainland Europe. So here we're comparing, essentially Norway and London. And as you can see on the right side of the graph, we have a substantial cost saving. So if you look at it in percentage terms, in this particular example, you're looking at 78% lower costs on energy. But on average, we would say 70 to 80% saving on your energy cost by simply putting your workloads into Norway versus housing that in the UK, for example. Of course, the picture in Germany or any other market has a slightly different flavor, but Germany, the picture actually looks more favorable for Norway. So the percentage saving could be higher than as opposed to putting it into Germany. So in this particular example, we're showing 225 million euros of cost savings over a 10-year term, just purely based on the energy costs across a 20 megawatt load. But relatively speaking, this can be played down to reflect much smaller loads or deployments. So by making these cost savings, which are usually significant, businesses free up cash to develop new products, invest in hardware, refreshes much earlier, or purchase new hardware even. They increase company profitability and, of course, consequently, enterprise value. Thanks, Glenn.
And again, just to report back, Warren, to you, we were just asking our attendees another question. And the question was, if you could reduce energy consumption costs of your data infrastructure by 50 to 60%, would this be of interest to you? And clearly everybody said it would be. So it's yes, because I guess 50% more savings, there's so much more, companies can do with it. So very clear yes to this question.
Yeah, I mean, data is the lifeblood of every company, or it's the new oil these days. And with the rise of data, you get the rise of data consumption, which obviously has a very strong bearing on the cost of electricity. Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Glenn. If you pass on to the next slide. So what are the key considerations and opportunities? Next slide, please, Glenn. Okay. So a little bit about our campus in Norway. So our campus is powered by hydro energy, and it's located in the N02 region of Norway, which is right on the southern tip. where historically this area has produced the lowest power prices in Europe. Our campus is fed, if you look at the little picture on the right-hand side of the slide, our campus is fed from 12 independent grid feeds, which take their power from over 100 different hydro pools across the southern region of Norway. And this is Europe's largest scale, 100% renewable power station. And Bulk has 2 feeds, completely separate and redundant feeds coming from this highly redundant and renewable transformer station, which are directed onto our campus. We own and operate these feeds at 132 kV and 110 kV on our own private substations, which means our campus is directly connected into clean, green energy at the lowest cost in Europe. So we have an infinite amount of power, plenty of power to facilitate lots of high-performance computing deployments or cloud deployments at the lowest carbon output. In fact, we can help companies get down to carbon neutral through putting their workloads into our data centers and at the lowest cost in Europe. Thanks, Glenn. Right, so taking a quick look at the campus. So the campus is Europe's largest data center campus. It's a 3 square kilometer or 300 hectare campus, which is zoned for data center use. We've currently master planned it for about 600 megawatts of IT load. That is a very large consideration of IT load, and we are developing that in phases. This particular campus is wonderfully suited to high-performance computing solutions that typically are running AI or ML type workloads, given the higher density power, higher power densities required. We can customize solutions to suit these workloads with multiple different cooling solutions, utilizing the climatic benefits of the region we're in, where the temperature seldomly climbs above 25 degrees in the summer. For the majority of the year, it's below 18 degrees. So free cooling is very much a thing which has a significant impact on energy usage as well. This campus offers unrivaled expansion and scale. And that's a very important factor you need to consider when you put these workloads into a data center. Can you scale inside of that data center seamlessly? Can you have your data residing in a location that can benefit from the infrastructure you've already put in there? This typically is a big problem for most metro or urban-based facilities. They run out of power. They either run out of power or they run out of space. We don't have that headache at this particular campus. So this obviously becomes a big problem for IT teams wanting to grow in a seamless fashion. We take that problem away as well. Allied to this, we have a world-class 24/7 operational and support team on hand to take care of all the diagnostic and break-fix remedial actions required so that you can treat this as a remote site. You don't need to be on site to manage your workloads and applications. This can be done completely remotely. And as we travel through the presentation, I'll I'll give you a proof case of what we did for effectively a hedge fund, a UK headquartered hedge fund that deployed on this particular campus. This area is also served, or this campus is also served by an international airport, which is only 20 minutes away. So if for whatever reason you do need to get to campus, you can fly directly into the region. It is not so remote that you can't fly directly in. Thanks, Glenn. So coming on to this fiber map, which ultimately is a bulk fiber map. So I mentioned right at the start of the presentation, we have 3 business lines. We have a fiber-based business as one of them, and we build out dark fiber, terrestrial and subsea cables. So very much an infrastructure play. So from a network or connectivity perspective, Norway is incredibly well connected to the globe with major new subsea and terrestrial fiber systems connecting to all major international markets at very low latency. So, just to give it a bit of context and a few examples, we are talking about round-trip transactions of less than 15 milliseconds going to the UK, Amsterdam, Paris, and Dublin, and between 15 and 20 milliseconds going to Frankfurt, Madrid, and other major intercontinental markets. So it really is closer than you think, and there is plenty of optionality and redundancy for route diversity as well. Thanks, Glenn. So coming on to the FinTech case study that I was referred to a bit earlier. So it's important to reflect on some proof points. So this particular customer is a UK headquartered hedge fund. They decided to build out their quant analysis workload in a region that had to offer a truly green solution and significant cost savings. Bear in mind they have 2 data centers currently located in London today. And after an extensive search of Nordic options, they decided on Bulk's campus in Norway, as it was closely aligned to their key criteria. So by deploying here, they've dramatically reduced their carbon emissions footprint, which is a significant criteria for their board, investors, and customers, but also plays strongly into their ESG policies and reporting, ensuring they are a responsible consumer of energy. They've achieved significant cost savings, which has brought forward their expansion plans and helped drive profitability in their business. And not only did we help them achieve these goals, but we also, via our partner network, delivered a complete turnkey solution where we assisted with all the logistical elements of procuring, shipping, of hardware, customs clearance, tax mitigation, to installation and ongoing support, all done through COVID and completely seamlessly. So this customer, for example, has never set foot on the campus, never been to the data center itself, and we've pretty much deployed what could be termed as a bit of a supercomputer on our campus, delivering 1,440 V100 GPUs, plenty of CPU cores, lots of storage, and of course, lots of RAM. Great, thanks, Glenn. So just to conclude, if sustainability and carbon emissions are a big thing to your business, and you're interested in reducing those 2 things, then you need to speak to a data center operator that really can tick the box as far as those 2 things are concerned. We would love to talk to you. We have a very compelling proposition as we've traveled through the presentation you've seen on the southern tip of Norway that can easily house these types of workloads. They're not latency sensitive, but we deliver very quick speeds between Norway and all key intercontinental markets. So please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. My contact details are included on this particular slide, so feel free to reach out. Make a note of those. We'll make the presentation available to all attendees as well, if you're interested to receive it. But we'll also make the FinTech case study available to all attendees as well. So please reach out and tell us if you'd like to receive that. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Warren. Great. Thank you so much for the excellent presentation. And now we open up to our Q&A session. So for all of our guests, you can now type in your questions for Warren in the top right corner of the screen where you see the Q&A box. And you can just type in the questions that come through to us. I will read it out and then we talk about them. So please feel free to pose your questions now. And we can see the first one already comes in, Warren. It's about what's the benefit of a co-location data center approach for fintech companies versus a pure cloud platform approach?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I suppose the answer to it is slightly subjective, but I'll do my best in answering that. I think cost and control are the main benefits. So the reality is that co-location and cloud can and should live symbiotically together, with colo doing the grunt of the high-performance computing work on customer-owned or leased hardware, and cloud used for back office and web infrastructure applications. So at our data center in Norway, for example, we have on-ramps to cloud providers, and typically our customers deploy their own solutions, but they also link into those cloud providers as well. In the fintech world, fintech startups typically have no plans to ever invest in their own IT infrastructure. So, in the 21st century, the idea seems absurd to do so. So yet, in a lot of cases, it makes more sense to build that infrastructure and utilize it more heavily. It's much more economical for fintech startups running at scale to switch most or all workloads from cloud to a colocation provider. And as a rule of thumb, 50% continuous workload utilization is the cutover point to make the switch. And then also, before renting one GPU instance on a cloud, fintech startups must consider the evolution of their computational needs as applications move through stages from prototype through to production. So, that's an important point. Really consider those computational needs, not what they look like today, but what are they going to look like in the future. And by getting this right, the startup will avoid, or even the established business will avoid cloud lock-in, and will keep will control costs running, at production scale.
Yes. I think that's a key topic. When I talk to other fintech companies, startups and scale-ups, often there is cloud lock-in, as you said, which is initially provided, or used by startups just to be on the cloud. But then once they scale and become really much, much more successful, they realize that costs are just spiraling out of control, and they don't want to be locked in anymore and look for alternatives. So that's, I think, really useful, the way you explained it, Warren. The second question which we've coming in here is about banks. And how can banks be more sustainable and show that they actually do something about climate risk? And I guess it's something which I also know from my own experience being on the board, of a UK bank, where we need to publish for the regulator our initiatives in terms of reducing climate risk. So how can Bulk support banks in their sustainability journey?
Yeah, so I think one area that needs serious consideration is compensation are tied to ESG performance. So some banks are making, material strides in this direction, but that's not the case for the majority, which is why this is such a key agenda item in the boardroom. So banks can better establish and communicate focused ESG metrics and targets aligned to their identified material issues. So one approach that strongly supports the E in ESG is to look at placing data workloads in locations such as Norway that are 100% low carbon and 100% renewable in energy production. So combine that with things like heat reuse and circular economy initiatives that Bulk is undertaking, we can feasibly help banks deliver a carbon neutral outcome.
Excellent, Warren. Third question which we've got here is, how do you make Bulk's operations as energy efficient and as sustainable as possible?
Good question. So first thing to mention, I think, is we take our power feeds from the most sustainable transformer station in Europe, delivering 100% renewable hydro energy. We completely aligned to the EU sustainability criteria and goals. We are aligned to reusing heat generated from the servers that sit in our data centers for other industry purposes. And we strongly vet suppliers and OEMs across our supply chain to maintain compliance with carbon directives and sustainable principles. So, even the cars on our campus, even the cars that our operatives drive, are fully electric. So we take a very, very sustainable carbon neutral approach to everything we do from an operational perspective.
Great. Another question which just came in is, what is the process of switching from one data center to another?
So the process of switching from one data center to another will largely depend on how a customer tries to tackle that. So what I mean by that is, are they keeping the hardware that currently sits inside of that data center, or are they combining that switch with a hardware refresh? And I suppose that takes a lot of complexity out of it. But naturally, there will be a cutoff point in your lease agreement or in your colocation agreement that you have with a colocation operator. Typically, organizations would plan 12 months out from that, and they would look at either how do I migrate my load elsewhere. That is something that Bulk can help with. We have preferred partners inside of our concierge of services that can help with the actual lifting, shifting, migration of the server hardware from one location to the next, all of which can be absorbed and amortized into the costs that we deliver on to our customers. So, no serious upfront costs attached to that. Or does the customer take the viewpoint that I'm going to be refreshing my hardware, therefore I'm going to deploy new hardware and new facility, and you coincide that with when your lease expires on your existing facility? So, those are the two approaches. We can help with both of those in quite a significant way.
Makes sense. Great. Makes perfect sense, Warren. The next question was about Norway. So for companies based here in the UK, the question was, can you tell us more about why Norway is a good location for financial institutions?
Okay. So first thing to mention, I think, is Norway is closer than you think. It's very proximate to all European markets and easily accessible. The other thing is in Norway, we have a very stable and safe political framework with a government that is incredibly welcoming. Norway, we are members of the EEA and early adopters in terms of compliance with EU regulation policies, including GDPR. We have a diverse and redundant high-capacity fiber connections into all European markets at very low latencies, and we referred to that in the presentation earlier. As a region, we produce a surplus of the most stable and renewable energy in Europe at the lowest cost base. So that in itself is a very, very compelling reason as to why Norway. And then, of course, we have an abundance of power and land, and which is primed to accommodate the scale needs of our customers. So in the high performance community, which is essentially what we're talking about here, they typically have significant needs that are growing, if not month on month, year on year. So the ability to be able to support those expanding needs with large amounts of power, large amounts of land is something that we don't suffer from. I'd say those are the key reasons.
Perfect. Makes sense, Warren. Thank you. Another question was about rising energy prices, which we, of course, see at the moment. So it says, in a time that energy prices are rising globally, can Bulk still help financial institutions reduce their data center costs?
Yeah, absolutely. The answer is we absolutely can. So I've already illustrated the potential cost savings attached to energy, in a stable European market free of instability, which essentially is attached to events like we're experiencing right now. But European energy markets are primarily driven by the fluctuation in gas prices, which is why we have seen huge volatility recently. So the delta, however, between Norway and European markets is still very consistent. I think we illustrated that in the slides, and stands, however, throughout the rise and fall of energy markets. So you're always going to experience, if there's a 70% cost saving between the UK and Norway today, that will maintain. If there's an 80% cost saving between the UK and Germany, that will hold firm as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Warren. And we didn't speak about risk so far, Warren. There's one question about risk management, and I just read it out to you. It says, how can locating HPC data workloads in Bulk's data centers help reduce risk?
Okay. So that depends largely as to how you quantify risk. But I would quantify risk as not being able to satisfy your broader investors' sustainability objectives, and thereby not being able to secure funding for growth and expansion and product development. bulk can immediately help solve those issues. So that's something we do just by virtue of the fact that we've got all of this renewable energy at very low cost. On the technical side, we have a climate that is very well suited to data center deployments and can deliver all manner of mechanical solutions designed to accommodate, the rigors of HPC environments. This can be very tricky in urban metro locations across Europe, where you are incredibly space constrained. So HPC workloads, by their nature, require vast amounts of power and sometimes space. So we have an abundance of this, and so can guarantee continued future scale with access to the greenest and lowest cost energy.
Thank you, Warren. And again, for our attendees, if you want to ask any questions, please type it into the Q&A box on the top right of your screen, and then we can come back to your questions. The next one is about certificates of origins. Warren, it's the question says there's a lot of discussion and confusion about certificates of origin. Can you please explain what this is and what it means for financial companies?
Yeah, okay. This is a complex area and probably not well understood by most people. But in a nutshell, the origin of your electricity is determined by where you live and where you consume it, where your business is based and where you consume it. So that's how it works in reality. It's really hard to be 100% renewable all the time without expensive storage systems. So, as the wind doesn't always blow, and if you don't have storage systems storing the wind that has blown, then of course you lose access to that energy that was derived. So the question really is, so how do electricity retailers beat physics? And they exploit a financial instrument called guarantees of origin. And in some other markets, it's referred to as renewable energy certificates, depending on whether you're in the EU or the US. But it works something like this. So whenever a renewable plant produces a unit of electricity into the grid, its producer is awarded a certificate that is sold to the highest bidder. So whoever buys the certificate can then claim that a certain amount of renewable electricity has been produced. But here's where the problem is. So the trade of certificates is not limited in space nor in time. So it means that you can buy a certificate from a region which is disconnected from your electricity grid, which is the space element, or from the past. So without making sure that the electricity was stored, which is the time element. So if electricity transportation costs were negligible, we would be able to always get electricity from a place where the sun shines or the wind blows. If electricity storage costs were negligible, we wouldn't care about when the sun shines or the wind blows, as we could just store it. But as transportation and storage are two of the biggest obstacles for a high penetration of renewable energy, certificates completely fail to address the real problem. So renewal certificates give the illustration that green electricity can be separated from the rest and sent to the lucky subscriber in this case. But unfortunately, once electricity is produced and fed into the grid, there's no way of controlling where it goes. So it blends with electricity from all other power plants running at the same at that time. So I'm sorry to say, but the electricity you get in your power plug will always be the same no matter what contract you're on. So if the wind doesn't blow in your region, there's no way to be powered by wind power, as an example.
Okay, so basically certificates of origin are not as useful, that's what you're saying, not as useful to really judge where the energy comes from.
No, it's a concept referred to as greenwashing. And so really you're buying something that says green, but you're not actually consuming something that is green.
Yes.
Where we come from is we say, we'll give you the certificate of origin. We can prove where that electricity is coming from, because we can tie that right back down to the origin of that electricity. And so you're not only buying green, but you're consuming green as well.
Great. This all comes back to the supply chain transparency, which I know we both talked about as well, which is so critical nowadays, that you know really where your energy comes from and who your suppliers are, that you can prove that.
Yeah, 100%.
So we've got another question here, which is, what sort of costs are involved in moving from London to Norway? Maybe on average, and what are the steps involved?
Yeah, again, one of those things that is really needs to be scoped. It's almost impossible to give a headline cost as to what it's going to what costs are involved, because every deployment is different. Every customer has a different requirement. Some are much larger than others. Some are much smaller than others. So really, it does require whoever's asking the question. I mean, maybe it's something we need to take offline and really do, have a meeting and look at what the scope is, and then we can give, attach a proper number to that. What I would say is, through bulk supply chain and partners, we do offer a concierge of services that can really get you from A, being London, to B, being Norway, in a very seamless manner at very, very low cost. And most of the time, we can take whatever that one-time cost is and amortize it over the period of whatever the colocation agreement looks like, so that that becomes an operational expense, not not a capex.
Great.
That's kind of how I would address it. It
Yes.
would be unfair for me to put just put random numbers.
Yes, no, makes perfect sense. I understand each situation is different, obviously, needs to be analyzed, individually. I've got another question about fintech companies. I mean, you talked about your case study, with the hedge fund in the UK and the quantum hedge fund moving their data, to bulk in Norway. And what are the main challenges and concerns for fintech companies now, Warren?
Again, different for different types of businesses, but I would say one of the ones that, or some of the challenges that we've seen through our engagement with fintechs is, one of the main ones is to control cost, but at the same time have access to flexible and high performance infrastructure in the very early stages of their business. So therefore, the attraction to be in the public cloud is there. Public clouds are so attractive and popular because they facilitate this early stage incubation fantastically with free credits, essentially. But let's face it. I mean, an investor is never ever going to question a fintech's use of the biggest cloud providers in the world. It's a bit like no one ever got fired for using IBM, right? What I would say is, before renting one GPU instance on a cloud, I think fintechs must consider the evolution of their computational needs. I mentioned this a bit earlier. As their AI applications move through stages from prototype through to production. So they must try to recognize the scale issues before they get buried by them, if that makes sense. But at some point, picking a specific cloud provider to run AI applications using their tooling, their compute, data, and networking services represents as much of a vendor lock-in as buying a mini computer or mainframe platform did back in the 80s and 90s. So, and then, when you add in data egress charges, for example, the cost of moving data off the clouds is astronomical. Moving large data sets can be slow in time and very high in cost. So fast-moving and fluid fintechs can really get stuck. And then what normally happens is they try to pit one cloud company against another cloud company to drive down the cost, but really it doesn't change the fact that they are still stuck. So I think the trick from a challenge perspective is to avoid trying tying into any one or any plan. If conditions change, then fintechs, if they don't tie into a plan, fintechs will be able to adapt by increasing spending on premises. And what I mean by that in this case is meaning the need to run infrastructure in a colo facility or on the cloud as they see fit at any given moment. But the reality of what we see is, don't jump in, don't get enticed by the free credits. Really have a look at your how you see your portfolio growing. What does it look like at prototype? How might it look like at full production? Take considered steps. Do things in bite-sized chunks. Put a little bit into the cloud, because that's a very good platform to get up and running, but don't put everything into the cloud. Prove your concept in the cloud, and then take an holistic view on how you might want to run that. Because the reality is, having a hybrid solution will give the company much more flexibility, much greater cost control, more bang for their buck, and certainly be far more cost effective.
Fantastic, Warren. I think I learned so much just listening to you. It was great to speak. And I would like to thank our audience very much for joining us today and for all your great questions and being so engaged this morning. I also would like to say thank you, Warren, for highlighting this key challenge, that which all fintech companies face, everybody faces in financial services today, which is everybody uses big data analytics, AI, machine learning, and costs are increasing so much and so quickly. And at the same time, there's a challenge of being not following for greenwashing, not just offsetting your carbon footprint, but actually reducing your carbon footprint and reducing your CO2 emissions. And with bulk, you can do both. You can cut your energy bills, you can cut your costs, and you also move towards net zero targets. So it's I think you explained it very, very well, how it really matters, how relevant it is, for anybody, any company working in financial services. So with that said, I would like to thank you for joining our FinTech Circle webinar today, Warren. For all our attendees, you will receive Warren's deck afterwards, his presentation, and also the handout as a gift for you, the case study, what bulk did and how bulk supported the UK quant hedge fund to reduce their costs significantly and move their data center to Norway. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And we look forward to speaking to you very soon. And please feel free to get in touch either with Warren on LinkedIn, or you can also reach out to us and we can connect you to Warren in order to continue the conversation.
Yeah, and I'll just say, Suzanne, I'll just add to that. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. But my contact details will be in the presentation as well. So if you do want to reach out and maybe arrange one-to-one meetings, be very happy to do so. I'm based and headquartered out of the UK, but not afraid to travel to any market around the world. So please do reach out. My contact details will be in the presentation. Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.